So 2024 is upon us. And there are some very big questions looming, lots of things going on in the world, lots of conflict, lots of change. And we've got some massive astrological events coming up in 2024. So in this deep dive, I'm going to be looking at the whole of the whole of 2024, the most poignant parts of 2024 as I see them on a month by month basis. I'm going to deep dive into some of the biggest events that we have coming up. Now, there's so much to choose from. I mean, let's have a quick look at what I think are some of the highlights of this time. So, we've got Pluto going into Aquarius for the second time, and then later on in, a third time into the sign of Aquarius. We had Pluto go into Aquarius in March of 2023. So we got a taster. To be fair, we had a taster of those themes actually when Saturn went into Aquarius, because that really gave us a feel for how restrictions and controls come in. And of course, they share a bit of a flavor for both of those, both Saturn and Pluto. So we've got Pluto and Aquarius. We've also got the Uranus and Jupiter conjunction in April. Now, loads of people are talking about that because that just happens very, very infrequently. I think roughly about every 14 years. But Jupiter, planet of expansion and hope and warmth and optimism, and also inflammation because it grows a little bit too fast. And then Uranus, change and shock and inquiry and the higher mind, and also innovation and invention. I mean, what could be coming up with there? I mean, that's a pretty big one, and that's one I've been looking out for quite some time. We've also got Jupiter moving into Gemini. There's a massive air theme going on this year, by the way, but Jupiter going into Gemini, I think Jupiter's the man of the match, actually, because Jupiter is going to be making aspects to all the outer planets at some point in quite strong and meaningful ways. So, yeah, we've got to really watch out for Jupiter. We've also got the North Node Chiron conjunction. It's happening in February. And from the perspective of the true node, or March if you're using the mean node, but from the mid-February to mid-March, that is really, really playing on. We've been feeling the energies of this coming in for quite some time, but yeah, it's game time in February. And then there's the Mars-Pluto conjunction. We've also got a Mars-Pluto opposition, both in the same year. And we've got Jupiter square Saturn. That only happens every 10 years or so. We've got 2 of those this year. We've also got Jupiter trine Pluto, and also total solar eclipse conjunct Chiron. I mean, obviously we get between 4 and 5 eclipses every year. This is the one that's really caught my attention because it's exactly conjunct Chiron on the 8th of April. So there's loads and loads of different things to deep dive on. By the way, my name is Louisa Tanner Munson. I am a channel who uses astrology and also hypnotherapy, timeline therapy, and things like that to provide support and coaching for people all around the world, just like you. And this channel is, I guess, my astrological offering. Most people know me for coaching through astrology, but I don't even know if I'm an astrologer or a channel or a bit of both these days. Who knows? But like when I look at a chart, I tend to kind of dive into it and almost seek answers from the chart. So yeah, we'll explore a bit of that as we go through as well. So let's have a look at these aspects in chronological order, and also the degrees that they fall in, because that's going to give us a really good idea as to who's going to be most affected this year from star signs and also the rising signs. If you know the degrees in your chart, this will give you a really good heads up. So we've got a lot of energy around the end of Capricorn and the beginning of Aquarius because of Pluto's transition into Aquarius. Obviously, Pluto moves very, very slowly, retrogrades, and then comes back again. So, we're still dancing around this 29-degree Capricorn to 0-degree Aquarius. We then got Mars and Pluto in both conjunction and opposition at different points in the year, also highlighting those. And we've also got the energy of the Jupiter trine Pluto at 1 to 2 degrees across the signs of Gemini and Aquarius. And of course, we've also got Jupiter in Gemini. So Jupiter moves into Gemini and goes over the 0-degree Gemini degrees. So what this is really highlighting to me is that there's a lot of stuff going on for air signs, in particular the early air signs, and just the very, very late earth signs. Obviously, if you're a late earth sign, if you're born just before, like the 20th of January or something, you'll probably have already experienced some of the very strong feelings surrounding Pluto. But I've supplied the dates here actually. So if you are an early Aquarius, an early Gemini, an early Libra, or right at the end of Capricorn, Taurus, and Virgo, then you'll be captured in these dates. But these are dates. So people born around these times, so the 19th to 26th of January and May, and then the 21st to 28th of September, you're going to be most inspired, is one of the ways of putting it, but also affected by the energies of having both Pluto and Jupiter highlighting these very, very sensitive degrees in your chart. Now, obviously, if you've got a moon or an angle around one of these early air degrees as well, that's going to capture a lot of this energy. So there's a lot of this energy for you to play with in this year ahead. And to a lesser extent, if you've got a planet at one of these early air degrees in your chart, then that's also going to capture the flavor. We've also got a bit of an attention here. So we've got the North Node Chiron conjunction on the 16 to 17 degrees in the sign of Aries. And then we've got the total solar eclipse conjunct Chiron on the 8th of April. Again, that's at 19 to 20 degrees Aries. It's an exact conjunction with Chiron. I've never seen anything quite like it. I have to say, it's quite a big chart. So I would also say people with a very strong cardinal influence. If we're talking sun signs here, people born between the 5th and 13th of January, the 4th and 12th of April, the 6th and 14th of July, or the 7th and 15th of October, you're going to be feeling that a lot more, so pay attention to around the 19th of February to mid-March for the North Node Chiron conjunction, but also be aware of what's going on around the 8th of April. But then we've also got this top player here, Uranus Jupiter conjunction, which is at 21 to 22 degrees Taurus. So again, the fixed signs, I think, should really pay attention to this. The 8th to 14th of Feb, the 9th to 15th of May, 11th to 16th of August, 10th to the 18th of November. You'll be feeling it, the effects of the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction a lot more strongly than everyone else. Obviously, if you are one of these earth signs that have got your sun at 21 to 22 degrees, say in the sign of Capricorn or Virgo, then you'll be feeling some of the real benefits of it, because it will be in a natural trine position to where your sun is. So, really, I'm just pointing out these key dates because they are likely to bring up some useful flows. I always think of planetary aspects as being like, we're surfing the cosmic waves, and you want to wait for that right time for that wave to come up. And so you get on your board and you're waiting. You could just check your ephemeris to see when the particular wave is coming. So we've got this wave of exciting change and expansion coming in a Taurus theme, and you just want to get on your board at the right time. So, that's why I'm sharing with you these dates. I would also say that anyone with a sun, moon, or an angle between 15 to 22 degrees of Pisces right the way through to Taurus, so Pisces, Aries, Aries, Taurus, Pisces, Aries, Taurus, and do we go as far as Gemini? Yes, Gemini should be in there as well. So it's the first four signs, the last sign, and then the first three signs of the zodiac. We've got like this continuous energy between 15 to 22 degrees. And so if you've got something around 15 to 22 degrees, in particular, an angle or a sun or a moon, really pay attention, especially if they're in those signs. If they're in the opposite signs, so that would take us from Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, and Sagittarius, they will be in opposition to these sort of energetics. But it's worth just looking at your chart before you get into 2024, looking at the degrees of your angles and the quality of them, because some of these are going to affect you more than others. Now, there are some other patterns that I'll be talking about as we go through this. But I just thought I've done a quick little overview. Now, obviously, you can't see the detail of this. And I will be going into this detail on a month-by-month basis. But just looking at these months, look, like there's lots of stuff going off in April and May. I mean, they are our two busy months. And then, November and December are pretty busy as well. August is pretty busy. There are some slightly calmer months. March, for instance, although it's got the first eclipse of the year and it's also got the solstice, there's not so much in terms of big planet movements going into an exact position. In this update for the year ahead, really what I'm looking at is talking about any of the big, slow moving, these heavy old planets that actually I don't know how heavy they are, but these slow moving planets that just seem to just move so slowly through our charts and create such a strong influence in our life, coming from out of our control. It sometimes seems these kind of psychological planets, so I'm looking at when they are making their big era defining moments, these aspects, like for instance, the Jupiter and Uranus. And Jupiter and Saturn obviously move a lot faster than Uranus, Neptune and Pluto. However, Jupiter and Saturn, actually, I'm going to do a bit of work on this in this year ahead, because the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction that happened in 2020, that was the 21st of December 2020, that was at 0 degrees 43 in the sign of Aquarius. Now, of course, now, in this year ahead, we've got Pluto just about to go over that point a few times, and he's going to be making lots of aspects to other things. So I'm quite curious to explore, what was going down in 2020, Christmas 2020, and how those themes might come back with a dollop of extra control from Pluto, for instance. So that is of interest. That's got my attention. But also the Jupiter-Saturn cycle, the previous one, was at 22 degrees in the sign of Taurus, and that took place in the year 2000 on May 28th. And so, we had that sort of very strong 22 degrees Taurus. And of course, this year we've got Jupiter and Uranus in a conjunction on the same point. So it's interesting that we've got two of the biggest events in 2024, which is, I would say, the Jupiter Uranus conjunction and Pluto finally going into Aquarius for the next 20 years, I think are the two big scene setters of this year. And they're both occurring on the last two Jupiter Saturn conjunctions. So I think this does bear a little bit of inquiry, what was set up in place at those times. I know in Europe, we were still going through, obviously I'm from the UK, so it didn't affect me so much, but I was working in international banking at the time. And so I know that between 1999 and 2000, most of Europe they ditched their original currencies and started to trade in euros. And then after they started trading in them, they started using them locally. So that was a huge, huge change for Europe. And so I wonder if something's going to, happen in terms of the euro markets, in particular, because this Jupiter and Uranus conjunctions in sign of Taurus, second sign of the zodiac. Second sign is very much about personal wealth. So it's worth a bit of examination, I suspect. And then, the Jupiter Saturn conjunction at 0 degrees Aquarius, December 21st, 2020, happened right before the rolling out of the biggest medical protocol we've ever seen. As far as, if what we've been told in history is true, and I premise that with a very, an eyebrow raise, because who knows, but, there are some massive changes going on, and also some very strong narrative changes, with a very sort of Aquarian vibe. And I talk about this a lot with my Pluto in Aquarius video that I recorded early last year. If you haven't seen it already, if you just click on the link above, you should be able to watch that. In fact, I've got a series of videos and playlists. So there's a Pluto playlist, which has got the Pluto in Aquarius, but it also looks at where Pluto is right now, transiting through your chart, and also where it was at birth. So that might be worth checking out. So yeah, lots of big things going on. So April and May look particularly busy. August, November, December also. We've obviously got our eclipse season. It opens at the end of March and goes on to the first week in April. And then we've also got the eclipses coming back at the end of September, and finalizing in early October. So they're always very, very busy times. What I'm going to do is look at this on a month by month basis, just telling you about some of the big aspects that I see coming up in that particular month, and then sharing one or two charts of that month and commenting. So it should really give you a feel for what's going on in this year ahead, and what to look out for, maybe what to plan around. I will be doing something separate about the full moons and new moons of 24, and also most likely talk about the Mercury retrogrades, because there's a real sort of theme coming up. Like the Mercury retrogrades are mainly in fire signs. I think the second one starts in Virgo but ends up in Leo, but the other two are in Aries, obviously earlier in the year, and in Sagittarius at the end of the year. So I think that's worth also a bit of an explanation and an exploration. So okay, so for January then, we've got the new moon in Capricorn on the 11th, which is quite a dynamo day. It's really worth a good look at. If you've got a very strong Capricorn theme, and particular are born around the, say from the 8th until the 14th, you'll be really picking up that flavor. So definitely use that to your best. I would always check out where it falls in your birth chart. So for instance, if it's in your second house, you might want to focus a little bit more about your earnings, if it's in your third house, and so on and so forth. This is something that gets my attention between January the 19th and the 21st. Now, I should just caveat that I'm doing this from the positions and dates and times of the UK time zone. So if you're watching from America, then it might be out just by 5 or 6 hours. You know, and obviously if you're in Australia, I might just be a little bit too late. But I always think that the UK is the midpoint, and it's also the time zone that I live in, hence why I do it this way. So Pluto in Aquarius, I know for Americans, it looks like it's changing over on the 20th. From our perspective, we get it a bit earlier. We see it on the 20th. We see it. We obviously, it happens at the same time, but it's your 20th, it's our 21st. But essentially the charts, you know, the relationship between all the planets at that time should be correct. But anyway, between the 19th and 21st of January, I would say this is a very potent time. This is a time for you to, especially if you've got that theme of end of Capricorn, beginning of Aquarius, this is a really strong portal of energy. It starts with a Pluto Cazimi. So the idea of Cazimi is a sun connecting with a planet absolutely in the heart, you know, so that planet is exactly in alignment with the sun. And this is the last one to take place in Capricorn, because obviously Pluto's been in Capricorn for 15 years or so. And so as the sun has come by, you know, these are all been in Capricorn. This is the last one. So as a set of energetics, it's going to be changed by next year. This is the last one to look at ourselves. So Pluto and the sun conjunct, I think, is really about our power. You know, how important are we? But it's also giving us a chance to face all that frightens us, about ourselves, but also in relationship to the world. I always think the conjunction is very much about us looking at an aspect of us, because we are, you know, face to face with ourselves. You know, it's two planets together. It's the communion. Like, how can you integrate the energies of Pluto, which are about control, absolutely control, the kind of rage that comes up when we don't get that control. And where does that rage come from? Usually fear. So, you know, underlying the Pluto energy is a lot of fear, and a desire to let go of all that unknown fear. So these fears are often very hidden, very which makes them more scary. They're the things that we often can't even see about ourselves. And if you think about Pluto, he's the ruler of the underworld. And everything that lives here returns to the world at some point. All our bodies decompose, and everything goes back to the land. It all goes back to Pluto. It all goes back to the underworld, so to speak. And so a lot of the Pluto energy is unseen, but it's felt, but it's not necessarily understood, because how can you understand something you can't see? So I really see that this is a very strong opportunity for us, the self, the ego, the sun that really represents our personality, for us to really see ourselves in a huge way. I mean, this could be quite an opening time for us to get over our fears. And then, like, moments later, the sun goes into Aquarius, kind of capturing that moment, but then moving it forward. It's saying, come on, love, let's move on. Let's move on from these fears. Let's leave these behind. There's a new way to be in the world. There's a new way to transact. And then the very next day, Pluto is into Aquarius as well. So I just think this is a very strong time. And if that's something that's going on for you right now, it's definitely worth using that energy and being aware of it. It's probably not a time to go into deep discussions with people who are not very good at having discussions, without getting angry, so I would avoid those really sort of anger baited conversations and negotiations, unless you're with somebody who can facilitate it and who can really help you through it, or that one or both of you has some kind of coaching ability, because I just think it's really, really strong energies. January the 25th, then we've got Mars square Chiron. Mars is making some big squares this year, and although Mars is one of the inner planets, it's one of our inner circle, very much about our motivations, our sense of vitality, our strength, etc. I still think Mars is quite slow moving. It takes was it 2.5 years or so to get through the whole wheel of the zodiac. So Mars is, I think, fairly slow moving. We've also got the Mars retrograde starting right at the end of the year as well. So for that reason, I think Mars is, I've included Mars aspects in these. On my actual monthly forecast, obviously I speak more about Mercury and Venus and the sun and the moon, because they're all happening very much on an inner level. But this is really to give you the architecture of the year, really held by the outer planets. And I've included Mars outer planet connections. And Chiron I consider a bit like Chiron. Chiron's interesting because A, it's not a planet, and B, Chiron moves in between the orbits of Uranus and Saturn. So, he is kind of unconscious, and he is also a connector. Like, I always see that Jupiter and Saturn are really our bridge planets. We've got our inner planets, the sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus, and Mars, really talking about our real personality and all the aspects of our absolute immediate life. And then you've got Jupiter and Saturn either expanding us or contracting with us, with these kind of unspoken, unseen energies of, I say Chiron, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, but Chiron is a bit of a bridge as well. So anyway, we've got Mars square Chiron on the 25th, which I think is pretty important. Chiron's the wounded healer, but also I think once we've mended those wounds, once you've healed those wounds, yes, we might get reminded of them, so that we can think, oh, that's great. A year ago, I'd have had a really tough time if that had happened, so we can monitor our progress, which I think is very good. But Chiron, we also master things. We become a master or a mentor. We get through things, and then we can start creating magic. I think Chiron's quite magical in many respects, but Mars in a square to Chiron, wow, we've got our vitality, our feelings of pride, our feelings of survival, and our thrust in a square with Chiron. So it's kind of frustrating. We want to succeed, we want to move forwards, and yet we've got things holding us back. So it's huge. And it's, through Capricorn and Aries, two cardinal signs that don't like hanging around too much, so this is really quite a big energy. So if you've got frustrations around the time of the 25th, then this is something to work with. And then we've got the full moon in Leo at the end of January, which is again very big. The big dates, I think, for January the 1st, January is the 11th, which is obviously the new moon. That's a great time for opportunities. The 19th to 20th or 21st, where you're facing your fears, you've got the chance to get over them. And then really on the 25th, because we've got Mars square Chiron and full moon on the same day. So pride, rage, triggers, power plays, all coming up. It's a time of frustrations, a time to really work through things. So January, I think, a lot of people often say that, for the first couple of weeks in January, it still feels like they're half asleep. They're still in their hibernation. And I guess that makes sense if you're in the Northern Hemisphere. The sun is, the days aren't noticeably lighter yet, are they? But then, as we get back into our groove, things start to come up. I always find when we take a bit of a rest, all sorts of stuff comes up, because we're not attending to all these like mundane things all the time, like our normal work-life balance and everything. It gets thrown slightly out of kilter. If you're a parent with kids at school, your kids are off and, and all of a sudden they're back to school. And so there's all these kind of balancing acts that we're doing. So I do think January is one that brings up a lot of unconscious stuff, ready for us to move forwards. Now, the big chart that I wanted to just explore quickly in January is Pluto going into Aquarius. So you'll see here, really emphasizing what I was talking about there. The moment that Pluto goes into Aquarius, 0 degrees 0, the sun is there at the same time, because the sun's just like led the way. They've just been in their conjunction. So, it's a deeply, deeply transforming time. We can look at our personalities through the through the lens of how much power we've got. And here's a way of looking at it. Like, what are we capable of? When I think about the echelons of society and how it might work, and obviously I don't really know, I think there's a lot that's hidden in this world, that we don't quite get to see the full picture of. And I'm okay with that. And I still don't even know if that's true or not. Maybe everything you see is exactly as it is. Who knows? But what I suspect with Pluto is we are faced with the challenge of how far we'll go for power. Like what will we do? There are some people who will stop at nothing to get power, because power is more important to them than things like love and connection and generosity and sharing and laughter and joy and birthing. And there are some people who literally do. So like, power is not good or bad. Power can be put to good use, but there is a kind of tipping point. And I guess I'm sounding judgmental, saying, there are some people who will stop at nothing to get power. They'll, there are people who just say, okay, well, that's how it is. That's how this seems. Right. Let's nuke this area here. Let's do that over here. And we have to do that, because if we don't do that, we'll lose our power. So much like power play stuff going on. So yeah, around the 21st, and the time when Pluto is going into Aquarius for the second time. Like the first time, we were in the Pisces, we'd just gone into Aries, and Saturn had just moved into the sign of Pisces. So March last year, 2023, was quite a poignant month. Lots of changes going on. But when Pluto went into Aquarius, we weren't really facing ourselves so much. We were looking at stuff going on in the world and being a little bit shocked. There was still a lot of talk about, Ukraine, and there was lots of information about that. Now, as Pluto's going into Aquarius, we're looking at how far we would go if we had all the decisions ourselves. What would we do? It's a lot more personal, because as it's ingressing into the sign of Aquarius, it's got that really strong connection with the sun. So we are really starting to are we empathizing with the people that are making these big decisions? Are we coming into our own authority and our sovereignty? Are we going the other way and actually thinking, who needs sovereignty? It's when we've got sovereignty and ownership that all this stuff comes up in the first place. This is huge. I think this is a very soul-searching side to the Pluto in Aquarius ingresses. Obviously, we've got a third one later on in 2024. Something else that I think is interesting at the day that Pluto's ingressing into Aquarius for the second time is the moon is there supporting. So it's not just, are we would we make the same decision, and how far are we prepared to go? But our emotions are there as well. Like, have we got the emotional stomach to make these decisions? But there's also this lovely airiness, and the airiness is obviously a theme that's coming up a lot. So this moon here in Gemini is almost like a precursor to the fact that Jupiter is going to make a trine to Pluto later on this year. And we're going to get this lovely feeling of sociability, and possibly community action. If you think, like, Gemini is the third sign of the zodiac, and as such, like, the third house issues are very much about early sociability. It's your early days at school, it's your early peers, your brothers and sisters, your siblings, your cousins, the early environment, where we're learning how to be social. And it's very much about 1+2 is 3. It's all our early learning blocks. And then I really see that the sign of Aquarius, which is typically ruled by the 11th house, as another really social sign. Obviously, they're both air signs, but the 11th house is about networks, and I think it's about a global vision, and it's about our friendships. And they don't have to be our friendships that we have from childhood. They could be our friendships with other vision makers around the world. So we've got this very strong, I think, call for community. Now, how are we building our communities? I think, what's going on with this sort of Gemini and Aquarius energy for this year, we're being encouraged to have local communities and far away communities, like global communities and local communities. And I guess the challenge for us is, which ones are we part of? Which ones can we influence? Where do we want to spend more of our time? Which of these are real? Which of these give us more control over who we are and how we present ourselves in the world? So I think that's a really sort of like big thing. At the time that this is happening, interestingly, Pluto's in a square to Jupiter. It's kind of saying, okay, well, we are facing ourselves. Maybe we do have more power than we realize. And maybe the power that we have is to take local action or to take little action, and see where that goes. And as we're starting to get a bit more confident, we're also coming up against our own boundaries. Like, we're thinking, oh, God, if I do this, I'm going to expand too fast. And so we're then putting in places, like little criteria as to how we can manage it a bit better. So yeah, a very, very potent chart. I really also like the fact that Mercury and Mars are still moving around together, and Mercury is out of its retrograde. So Mercury and Mars have been hanging out together for quite some time now. And I see them being quite practical, Mars and Mercury working together. They're thinking in terms of achievable action. Mars is saying, okay, yeah, well, let's find these resources to do it. Let's make this happen. So this is quite practical. And obviously we've got Chiron and the North Node getting closer and closer as well. So this, I think we're really thinking about big consequences, and what might be taking place. Anyway, let's have a look into February. So as we go into February, we've got the new moon in Aquarius on the 11th, Mars conjunct Pluto. That's a big one. That's on February the 14th, on Valentine's Day. Wow. I mean, that's a very intense day to be romancing, isn't it? And then 5 days later, the North Node conjunct Chiron is exact. We then got the sun going into Pisces, and then the full moon in Virgo. So all these events are actually kind of paced out quite nicely with a few days in between. Although actually the North Node conjunct Chiron and the sun going into Pisces, they're actually together. Sorry, take that back. Anyway, here's where I think the sensitive dates are. So the 11th, obviously, the new moon. I think that's always worth pointing out. We're in a new emotional cycle, this new part to grow. There are obviously moments in time to make new decisions. So check out where that new moon in Aquarius is in your birth chart. Where is 20 degrees? Is it in the 3rd house, 4th house, 5th? Like, where is it? How is it going to impact you? Then we've got like the conjunct Pluto aspect, which is big. This is, I think I see this as being a huge sore spot, and it leads perfectly into the North Node conjunct Chiron energy. They're just like 5 days apart. So we are absolutely working with our sore spot, and obviously the sun is moving into Pisces on that very day. And then 5 days later, we've got the full moon, and it's interesting. Like, I've looked at that full moon because that's why I put in let things go, see beyond your restrictions. Can't remember why I said that now. Let me just flick and have a look at it. Because it's obviously got some big things going on. One of the things that I really like about that full moon at the end of February, and I'll talk about more about this in the actual February forecast, but we've got Jupiter is really nicely placed in a sextile to the sun and a trine to the moon. So it's really supporting us being able to let go all of that energy. So, we've been feeling sore in the middle of February and really like noticing what's not working for us. And then towards the end of February, we've got that real opportunity to release things and move through things with some generosity. So we've got the North Node conjunct Chiron here. So this is the chart I've selected to have a look at. Now, obviously, we've still got the energy of Pluto and Mars conjunction, and Venus is right in between the two of them, which is kind of fascinating too. We've got this applying moon into the square, into a square between Chiron and the North Node, really making it very tender. Especially because the moon is in the sign of Cancer, its own sign. Wow. So if we're going with the idea that Chiron represents our childhood wounds, those unhealable things that we carry with us our whole life, those things that you almost can't get to, they're so covered with layers and layers and layers of conditioning and strategies to avoid being hurt. So we rarely get to the core of it. But every now and again, if we have one of these conversations, and you notice it on social media, people say something and somebody all of a sudden flies off the handle. And often, when they fly off the handle, they'll say because of there'll be some kind of moral judgment, that has piqued them to such a great degree that they're triggered. But actually, in nearly all of those situations, if you go to the cause of what was really going on, was it your moral judgment? Or was it something that happened to you really, really young that keeps just getting ignited in a myriad of different ways? It is like that, like the idea of a nuclear button, not that you're going to explode and like destroy everything, but it's the idea that you destroying yourself, like this feeling just comes up over and over and over again. Now, the North Node I see as very much a karmic point that is showing us, possibly how we struggle through life, but also why we're doing it. Like, what is our purpose? What are we hoping to shift? How are we really wanting to make all of the sum of our chart make sense? The North Node is an interesting one, and so we've got like this idea of purpose and legacy and where we're shifting to, being like being activated by some of our core wounds. It's like we could actually strip off all of the layers of the onion and get to the real cause of what's been going on. I actually see this this month, in particular on the 19th when it's exact, but I see the lead up to it's already happening. So many people I know over Christmas have said, I'm taking a lot of time off, or I'm taking time out for me. I'm going into coaching, I'm going into counseling. So many people are on a bit of a sabbatical right now because they can feel this awareness coming up in them. And it is absolutely at its pinnacle around the 19th of February. And, are we going to get some relief from that? Well, I do think, and I said earlier, that Chiron gives us mastery. We might realize there are some things we can't change. But what we can change is how we feel in this moment. Are we still going to give it the same power that it's always had? Is there something that can unravel the hook that is in us? So all of this is coming up, and just to make it even more triggering, to help us. And I'm actually really quiet. I love actually these slightly harder aspects, even though they're difficult to manage in the moment. With this moon in the sign of Cancer is like so soft and is really like pulling us into childhood stuff and mum love, and whether our mum like loved us enough, and a lot about our family history. Like the Cancer is the fourth sign of the zodiac, so what was going on in our family. We are absolutely given this perfect opportunity to feel the stress of our trigger to the max around this time. And I think it's only when it gets so bad that we really get to the point of it. I think that's why, you know, some people who have addictions, you know, nobody is going to ever stop smoking before it becomes a problem, you know, or nobody's ever going to stop drinking necessarily. Like, you know, only people that think they have a problem with alcohol say, I stopped drinking alcohol, because if it wasn't something that they did regularly, they would just say, oh, I just don't drink it. You know, that it would never be one of these big statements. But when someone says, I've stopped drinking alcohol, I don't drink alcohol anymore, it's usually because they did at some point. And they never usually make that decision until it gets sufficiently bad enough. So, you know, like with, you know, relationships breaking down, you know, we always say, oh, that's when it broke up. But it usually took a long time to get there. And it has to have some kind of massive event to really create the change. So, you know, I it's with some empathy, and yet excitement that I see this aspect come up. I do think it could bring us to our knees, especially now that Pluto has just had a conjunction with Mars. And so people are a lot more territorial. People are a lot more fixed in their views. People are wanting to get back into their power. They are shaking their fists and saying, what the has been happening here? You know, people are getting really quite strident. You know, this is a very big taster of, you know, what's going on in the world, like, you know, what we're feeling, how mad we are being driven. And this is all going on at the same time. So we've got this feeling of, I must survive, I will survive. And then how far will I go to make sure I survive? And also, you're looking at it from the position of wounding. So this is really massive stuff in February, really huge stuff. Thank goodness Venus is in here just to help us remember that we need each other at these times as well. You know, we're not necessarily doing this alone. If we're going to survive, we do need to survive together. And for that, we might need connection. We might need actual relationships and to share things and to trust. Trust is such a big one. You know, Pluto, like really tense Plutos, and, you know, in charts really have trust issues. So this is a massive, massive time for us. And I am excited because I think we're actually going to get to some of the deeper levels of why things are happening in the way they're happening. It wouldn't surprise me if there's more stuff revealed through the medium of the media, to kind of give us a bit of a slightly softer landing. I just feel that stuff is coming out, stuff is being revealed. We're finding stuff out about ourselves. Of course, we're going to be finding out stuff about what goes on in the world. So interesting times. Anyway, let's move on to March. So March then. So I said there wasn't much going on, but obviously there's always stuff going on. And, you know, as I look on a month by month basis and the actual month ahead forecasts, which will come out, you know, obviously in March or just before, you know, I'll be talking about the other planetary movements, but there's no real big stuff going on. We've got the new moon in Pisces on the 10th. So have a look at where 20 Pisces is in your chart to see what area of your chart is being highlighted. If you're not sure, then look out for the March updates when I release them. And I'll be able to share that information with you. We've got the season change. The sun goes into Aries on the 20th. We've got the spring equinox. So I always think those times are big. They're shifting points for us. And it's time to bring us back into the world a bit more, and to really come out of our hibernation. And obviously it's the start of the astrological new year, according to whether you use Western or sidereal astrology. And obviously there's a lot of people that will vehemently be shaking their heads at me saying that, but yeah, forgive me. And then March the 25th, we've got the first eclipse of the year. So this is the one that I want to have a look at. Before I let you know, like before we look at that chart, let's just say the 10th is a time for new opportunities. The 20th is our spring clean, and it's getting ready for this feeling of this new year. And then the 25th, I think letting expectation drop with partners is really important. And here's why. So this is the lunar eclipse, which is essentially a full moon that is in alignment with the nodes. You can see you've got the north node here and the south node here. Now this is a south node eclipse. So the moon is connecting to the south node. The sun is connecting to the north node. The south node is always reminding us of what we need to let go of, what we need to cut ties with. It reminds us of what we had, but it also reminds us, especially at the time of the full moon, it reminds us of what we don't have anymore. So like we have that feeling, that memory, that understanding of everything that once existed. It could be sweeter times, could be happier times, could have been times when we felt comfortable in a partnership, given that it's in the sign of Libra. Again, it's worth looking at where it falls in your birth chart. So, if it's falling in your 7th house, it could really have a strong message about your relationships. What are you missing? What's really not working in terms of that? If it's in your 10th house, you might be thinking about old careers and how you can use the knowledge that you had in the past to be able to move forwards in the future. There's all sorts of different energies. Suffice to say, you've got the sun, which is our ego and our personality, our obvious personality. You've got the moon, which is your psyche, that very soft side of us. And they're in opposition. During those times, I think projections are rife. People are projecting onto each other. And really, we're standing as mirrors to each other to really see ourselves. What we are accusing others of doing or not doing is really what's going on in ourselves. What can't we see about ourselves that if we could see right now would transform all of our relationships? That's the big question that I would put to you. So this question is very much about independence on the one hand, and then survival through being connected to others. Are our connections slowing us down? And do we have some pain around that we need to let go of? Do we need to let go of our old coding about relationships to be able to have more independent but connected relationships? So much going on. So anyway, also at this time, we've got this trine to Pluto, which I think is really, really helpful. We can actually find a powerful solution. We don't have to do this alone. We really, maybe what we need to do is to let go of some of our need to be in control all the time, and surrender to the idea of being completely in control, share the controls somewhat. So I think this is interesting. Venus and Saturn are also in a conjunction at this time, and they're in a sextile to Jupiter and Uranus. So we've got this really quite supportive layout here. This is a time for us to really move forwards, but to realize we can do it with others. So I really like this. So we're on to April, and this is like one of these big months. And so if you think about it, we have been building up this whole idea of clearing, lots of big energies going on. And then here's April. First of all, let me just give you my date watch times. So I do think the 8th is a really big one, because we've got the total solar eclipse at 19 degrees Aries, which is exactly where Chiron is and not far off from the North Node. So it's a new moon in Aries par excellence. I mean, oh my goodness, what a strong catalyzing day this is. So yeah, the first set of eclipse pairs, I think is going to create a big shift. And I think a lot of that energy is really coming to play around the time of the total solar eclipse, the new moon. Massive days. My comment was, clear those karmic triggers, blocks. It's epic. And then a couple of days later, we've got the exact moment of Mars being conjunct Saturn at 1414 Pisces. Now that's really important for anyone that's got anything between 12 and 16 Pisces. That's going to be really feel like it's on target. So that's worth watching out for. The sun goes into Taurus, and then a few days later, we've got the Jupiter conjunct Uranus energy, which I was speaking about before, which is falling, like I said earlier, on the Jupiter Saturn point of 2000, when they last came into last time Jupiter and Saturn came into a conjunction. So this is a very, very sensitive point of change. We've also got the full moon in Scorpio on the 24th, and then on the 29th, again, another Mars aspect. Mars is in a conjunction with Neptune at 28 degrees. Yeah, really, really big day. So what I've said is around the 21st, obviously we've got the Jupiter conjunction with Uranus. Like, how are you expanding? There are going to be fresh changes upon us. So I do think this is the thing that steals the show, but obviously the April the 8th is pretty big too. And then, from the full moon to the 29th and beyond, I would say this is the full moon in Scorpio, followed by Mars, one of the rulers of Scorpio, in a conjunction with Neptune. This is intensely spiritual. We're talking about soul actions. We're talking about kind of meeting our maker, and what we might do with that knowledge. Like, if you woke up in the middle of the night thinking that you were dying, how would life get suddenly clearer? Those moments where you hear some really important news, that somebody has passed or somebody's about to be born. Usually it's the difficult ones, isn't it, that really brings us up close and personal to our own mortality, and that feeling of, okay, well, crikey, maybe there is something a lot bigger to this life than we expect. And I think the 24th to the 29th is that in motion. A lot of people say that around the eclipses, they have, I guess, a bit like if there's an earthquake, there's a zone where, everything like crumbled, and then there's another like ring zone around it, where there was less impact, but it still reached out. And then, there's kind of clean energy thereafter, so there are like these zones of containment. And with eclipses, I often find that you've got like a 2-week gap either side of the start of the eclipse pairs, and a 2-week at the end, which obviously takes us to around the full moon. So I really see that what's going on around the full moon is kind of like the emptying of that eclipse. It's shutting the door on the eclipse a little bit, but it's the eclipse energies are still being felt. So yeah, a really, really big month. I think I might have a couple of charts for this one. So let's bring on the total solar eclipse at 19 degrees Aries. So as you'll see, there's loads. Well, first of all, let's just acknowledge for a second that we've got all the planets within just 4 signs. So that's something that we don't usually see, so this is absolutely quite intensely funneled energy, all within a third of the zodiac. So that's worth, and the North Node is here as well. So that's, quite important to focus on. You can see, like I said, Mars and Saturn are in a conjunction. Obviously that goes exact after this total solar eclipse. Well, you've also got Jupiter and Uranus coming into an exact conjunction. These are in a sextile, which I think is kind of groovy, quite helpful. So that's all very nice. The Saturn and Mars is really, really giving us a shot of discipline. Now, hopefully, we haven't got any difficult father issues to deal with at that time, because that could be a lot of troubling dad issues coming up, with Saturn. Saturn's often representing the father, and Mars can show, difficulties. But, it's like Saturn's also about taking responsibility and being a grown up, being an adult, and wearing adulthood in a great way. And Mars is really showing how we survive. So, this could be a really great moment where you become really real to the cost of how you're living your life, and start taking greater responsibility for yourself. So, I mean, this could be very, very helpful. It's in the sign of Pisces, which I don't see as being that strong. But maybe what it's showing is where you've let things ride too long, where you've let spiritual catch-alls and spiritual sayings or spiritual thinking, where that's taken you on your journey. Has it taken you on point or off point? Has it helped you? Has it actually moved you further away from being responsible? So this is us waking up, and it's like conscious responsibility and conscious action. So this is really powerful. And obviously I'm going to be talking about this one in a minute, Jupiter and Uranus, but they are either side of this very intense funnel of Aries energy. And so you've got the sun and the moon and Chiron all at 19 degrees, the North Node just there. So it's in on the act. You've also got Mercury. You've also got Venus and Neptune all very, very tight together in a conjunction. So, you know, it's like a daisy chain, you know, like they're all lined up like fairy lights on a Christmas tree, you know. So you've got Neptune energy is kind of opening it with this kind of, oh, I wonder what is being created right now, connected to Venus, like it's this flowing wonder of, wow, what is possible? What more is possible with my life? Because the North Node is there. What more is possible with my life? What more is possible if I you know, if I follow what I love? What more is possible if I dream bigger dreams? You know, so that Venus and Neptune energy is beautiful. And then we've got this very strong, oh yeah, well, don't worry about your dreams for a minute, because actually I feel a bit under attack. You know, we've got the sun in Aries, the moon in Aries, Chiron in Aries all together. It's like, wow. It's like your woundedness, the childhood stuff, where you are now as the person, the adult you, the person you, represented by the sun, your childlike you, the one that wants to blow off responsibility, the moon, the psyche, the emotional you, the frozen you, you know, the Chiron part of you, all together. And then just the other side, you've got Mercury. So you could actually start thinking beyond this. You could actually, like Mercury is actually leading us, you know, Mercury's leading us out of that. So it's, I see this as a chance where we could really be focused on pain and focused on how that's manifested in our life and our emotions and where we might want to move beyond that. Or you could just recognize that already exists and start using the power of your imagination, the power of perspective, the power of flow, the idea of dreams, reconnect to some of those childlike dreams, those ones where you are wondering about what comes up in life. You can also let independent thought, like Mercury in Aries, you know, help that. You can use the idea that you're growing up in a spiritual way. You've got your spiritual maturity represented by Mars and Saturn, and you've got quite a lot of self-discipline as well. It's like enough is enough. I really feel that, you know, this total solar eclipse, this new moon in Aries is enough is enough is enough. Let's move on. I'm feeling a disco beat there and Diana Ross or whatever, you know. And then we've got Jupiter and Uranus in a conjunction, you know. That's the next step. So I think the first step in April is to get massively pissed off with ourselves, you know, to realize, oh my God, am I just going to stay here forever? Am I going to stay in pain forever? Am I ever going to move beyond pain? Just had a child bust in.
Smelling good.
Smells good in here, does it? That's my incense. Yeah, so my sense is we have to absolutely get completely pissed off with ourselves and completely pissed off with the world to actually really create some change. And of course, it's not the pissed offness that really creates the change, but that's the thing that lets you know, that signals that you're ready for something new. I think for so many of us, we've been holding on to old patterns and, you know, like lots of change has happened in our lives over the last 3 or 4 years. And in particular, if you go back even further, like the last 10 years, when you think about how technology has changed the way we all live, you know, our lives are changing quite considerably. And for a lot of that time, we've just gone with it. You know, it's easier to keep our lives as they are and to just move with what's occurring. And it feels like in April, people are starting to take a stand and say, no, enough. No, I'm not going to let go of this. I'm not going to submit further. I'm not going, or you might realize just your own personality is becoming the problem. Your desire to keep things as is. For instance, I had a relationship years and years ago, 11-year relationship, and I kept in it for way too long. Great guy, lovely guy. I don't suppose he's listening, which is good. Really, really fantastic. We had a life together and everything. And yet it wasn't working. And I couldn't let it go. And I couldn't let it go. And I couldn't let it go. And then eventually, you know, you have to let go of the things that aren't working for you because they make you ill. and it starts to absolutely destroy your life. This is the time. April the 8th is the fulcrum of a storm, and it could be your own personal storm. It could be a community storm. It could be a world storm, but it's a fulcrum point where people say, enough. I'm not putting up with this anymore. This is substandard. This is not what I'm looking for. This is not how I want to live. And I realize I'm part of my own problem. So if you think that Aries is a sign of self, it's the identifier, I am energy. We are realizing that we are, even with like the world politics and, how our communities are, it all looks like it all happens without our say so. And yes, we could argue that voting is maybe not as good as we might want it to be. Who knows how that all happens exactly? But, we are like, our energy still counts for stuff. What energy are we putting out in the world? Are we putting out a lot of, oh yeah, I'm okay with this energy? Or are we saying, no, it ends here. The buck ends here. It stops now. And so I really do see this as a point for us to get very strong. And like I said, this leads perfectly into this fresh new opening in Taurus. So let's have a look at that chart. So we've got Jupiter conjunct Uranus in the sign of Taurus at 2149 degrees. And so you can see them here in this conjunction. Now, at the time of the conjunction, beautifully in a trine with the moon. So again, this is really touching us. This conjunction is stirring something in all of our psyches, which I love. I just think that's very, very useful. It's also in this beautiful sextile to Mars. So we're feeling the motivation to move. Also with the moon in opposition to Neptune and Mars, the moon is really stirring us. The psyche is must take action, must do something. I'm ready to use my imagination. And this is a bit of a spiritual quest. Like I said, at the end of the month, Mars, it's funny because, Mars makes a connection, like an exact conjunction with Saturn, and then later an exact conjunction with Neptune. And so it's right in between these two at the time of this beautiful Jupiter and Uranus conjunction. So we have got expansion opportunities, newness, freshness, invention. We can take our personality so much further than we've ever dreamed of. Our psyche can evolve. Our emotions can be fresh and new. Wouldn't it be great if we had a new emotional set point? Wouldn't it be, I don't know, could we create new possibilities for ourselves? If we're not working from the same psychic drains that we've been working from, all of our emotions and triggers and things like that have just drained all of our energy out. Maybe if we've already let go of this or got pissed off enough, maybe this is giving us a new sense of possibility, like what is actually possible and how can I make possibility my new reality? We are ready to take action. And yes, we can be mature about it, with this Mars conjunct Saturn, and we've got some discipline about it. And yes, we also realize with the Mars and Neptune conjunction that we are needing to take spiritual action. This isn't just about us having a peaceful physical life here. This is also about us realize we are ensouled beings. So I love it. Really, really love it. Beautiful, beautiful. And Chiron is now in a conjunction with Venus and Mercury, and also the North Node. So, it's like everything is rallying around to make sure all of our old hurts are soothed so we can use this new sense of possibility. Brilliant, utterly brilliant. So I love it. And I will be talking more about it in an upcoming video for sure, because I'm going to look at the history of Jupiter and Uranus and their conjunctions and their cycle. So they've got a very interesting 83-year cycle that I'm exploring right now in my notes behind the scenes. So I will be talking a lot more about that in due course. Anyway, let's have a look at May. Now, this is another one of these big ones I mentioned, and that's mainly because Jupiter goes into Gemini. So we've got loads of great sort of Gemini air energy coming up. So it does start with a new moon in Taurus. And then from the 20th of May, boy, just things really start to shift. I don't want to kind of negate the new moon in Taurus, though, because as you can see, it's at 18 degrees in the sign of Taurus, which is very, very close to the position of the Jupiter and Uranus conjunction. So it's one of my date watches, the 8th. You know, it's about, I'm getting everyone coming in this office while I'm doing a recording today. It's like Piccadilly Circus here. So the 8th, we've got fresh pathways, following up on all of your new ideas on how you want to be and live in this world. So I think the new moon in Taurus is perfect. If you've got a really strong angle, or look where Taurus is, this is where your fresh pathways are taking place. This is very exciting. But then from the 20th right the way through to the rest of the month, boy, have we got some expansion. So I think the 23rd is a very powerful day. We've got Venus in a conjunction with Jupiter. Now, I haven't really spoken about some of the easier aspects, but Venus in a conjunction with Jupiter is definitely there. It's also on the same day as the full moon in Sagittarius, and it's also on the same day as Jupiter making a sextile to Neptune. So also Venus is sextile Neptune on the same day as well. So there's a lot of beautiful energy here. So that's a beautiful day, the 23rd. Now, full moons, yeah, they're tricky for sure. But yes, with this Venus conjunct, like Venus and Jupiter are the two benefics, and then Venus and Neptune are the two lovers. Like Venus is the planet of love, Neptune is higher love. So you've got this love, higher love, and expansion and benefics. And of course, Jupiter is the ruler of Sagittarius as well. So I see this day as being an expansion into love and adventure. So that's really strong. And obviously, I'll be talking more about it in my May forecast. And then on the 25th to the 29th, Jupiter enters Gemini. And we've also got this Mars conjunct Chiron. Oh, that's really strong. So let's have a look at what that's opening up for us. Now, one of the comments I've made is that this is a time of renewed openness. TMI, too much information. You know, Jupiter is quite chatty, let's face it, and he's in the sign of Gemini, not known for being very happy in the sign of Gemini, I would say, given that, you know, he rules its opposite sign. But, you know, Jupiter and Gemini can really bring the energy of communication up a notch or two. It's very, very strong. And I think there's sharp words coming up as well, because obviously the Mars conjunction to Chiron, you know, it's exact on the 29th, but it's already in being. It's already coming into its own, you know, from the 25th for sure. So I do think we're coming into a last week with lots of sharper words, a lot more information being shared. So let's see. Let's have a look at one of these charts. So this is the chart for when Jupiter enters Gemini. So you'll see here right at the bottom, Jupiter's down here. It's in a conjunction with Venus. Both of them are making that sextile to Neptune, which is very beneficial, beautiful. Jupiter's also in a conjunction with the Sun. So we've got this real kind of explosion into having fun with other people, like, you know, the Gemini energy of interest, reading, looking, watching, seeing things, seeing pretty little jewels and butterflies. They love their strong and bright and fresh colors, flitting from thing to thing, and it just feels so good. It's like a party, really, you know. And in this sextile to Neptune, it's quite illusory. We could get very we could feast on all things visual, you know, so that's quite strong. Interestingly, at the exact moment Jupiter goes into Gemini, there is also this very strong quincunx energy to the moon in Capricorn. Now, obviously, Capricorn and Gemini aren't very well aligned. They've got nothing in common at all. But the moon is still lending its support to Jupiter and Venus and the Sun. So there is this feeling that there's true magic being made. Now, I've read a little bit about Magi astrology, and they really quite like the quincunxes and the trines. In particular, it's quite magical. It's a difficult energy to, you know, it's slightly stimulating because it's, you know, it's not of the same signs or quality or element, but it's not too easy, you know. So it's a minor energy, obviously, you know. It has to be around 148 to 152 degrees. So there's a tiny orb of difference. But yeah, that moon is lending lending support to this kind of love fest and this place of interest. We've also got, obviously, Uranus is still nearby. It's not out of the conjunction with Jupiter. That's about to happen, but they're still vibing on that. So, as Jupiter is going into the sign of Gemini, it's still very imaginative and exciting. And then look here, we've got Mars in between the node and Chiron, and it's also in a square to Pluto, which is very interesting. Chiron's in coming into a square with Pluto. So there's this very sort of jarring energy as well. It's like, okay, we realize that there have been problems. We realize there's some very systemic problems going on. It goes right to the root and right into the ground. We don't know how far it goes, using that Pluto analogy. However, we are aware of the pain. We are aware of where we might need to move. And there is also this impetus to connect and to learn and share. And I love that. I think that's really brave and very cool. So on to June then. What is coming up in June as a possibility? Well, I see this not necessarily as a very dynamic month, although this little bit here, between the sun in Cancer and the summer solstice, and then followed straight after by the full moon, I think is quite interesting. So I do think the 20th to 22nd is a portal to the summer. It's kind of, we're entering into the summer on a full moon, which feels really kind of interesting, because obviously the summer solstice, I'm talking Northern Hemisphere now. Apologies if you're, in the Southern Hemisphere, but in the Northern Hemisphere, the light is really coming back to us. We're really, really in the light. And then at the time, of the longest day of the year, we've also got a full moon lighting our evening as well. So I do see there's something to do with light going on in June. On June the 3rd, we've got Jupiter in a trine to Pluto. Now, this is one of the big energies that I've commented on. A few days later, we've got the new moon in Gemini. So I think the 3rd to the 6th is also a portal of light, it's social, and it's giving us power. It's giving us a lot of power to, think new thoughts and be in a new way. And then there's this very tense spot in the middle of June where we've got Mars square Pluto at 1 degree, in between Taurus and Aquarius. This is a very, very sort of like tense moment, but it's energized by these two light portals either side, which is interesting. So we've got like the spring, early summer light, and we've got the into the summer light. I just like this. Let's have a look at one of the charts. Obviously, I've brought up Jupiter trine Pluto because for me, that's the strongest one we've got in June. And here we see the Pluto trine to Jupiter. You'll see that Jupiter's in a conjunction with Mercury. It's still in a conjunction with Uranus. It's also it's not in a conjunction with Venus and the Sun, but Venus and the Sun are in an exact conjunction on the same day in the sign of Gemini. So it's interesting that we've got Pluto to do with control and learning new patterns, like completely surrendering to our old way of being and becoming really new and fresh with a sort of Uranian, obviously Aquarian kind of energy. We've got Jupiter new in the sign of Gemini, playing with lightness, playing with sociability, playing with communicating more. I think this is a time when AI is going to really go through the roof, like the possibilities are endless for AI. Now, I've spoken about this quite a lot in my Pluto and Aquarius video. I've spoken about it. I think I've tried to be balanced, but my own natural bias towards artificial intelligence has come out a little bit. But I do actually think that by the time June comes along, we're going to see a lot of the possibilities for lightness through AI. Now, obviously, we're already starting to see some of the negatives of AI, but I do think I think it's about getting the balance right. How do we step forward as a culture, as world societies, if we banish all AI, is that possible? I don't think so. We have to move with the new technology, but we also need to learn about the dangers of the new technology and how do we manage that. So there's some big things there, but suffice to say, it's kind of exciting. It's kind of fresh. Things are moving quite quickly because Gemini is a very fast moving sort of sign energy. It's ruled by Mercury, and like I say, Mercury is in a conjunction with Jupiter, so it's kind of mirrored images. It feels really good. On the day that Jupiter and Pluto are in their trine, we've also got the Moon and Mars together, really giving a lot more energy. There's a lot of strong energies about it, so it's a very, very strong moment in time, and I would absolutely advise you to have a look at where this point here, sort of the end of Taurus, the beginning of Gemini, and the end of Capricorn and the beginning of Aquarius are in your charts, because they're super strong. Also, if you've got something towards the end of Aries, really, really look out for that. If you've got anything around these areas, it's going to absolutely be sort of resonating with the energy of Jupiter in a trine with Pluto. Now, obviously, Jupiter will trine with Pluto. Jupiter has an 11.8 year cycle. So, it can make 2 trines with Pluto. It will make the first trine as it's approaching Pluto, and it will make a second trine as it's separating from Pluto. So it will make 2 trines within a 12-year period, but it's still a fairly rare energy. And it's the first time they're making that energy together in the air signs. So we've got the new moon in Cancer on the 5th, giving us some real gentle opportunities to really work on everything that we've learned so far in the year. On the 15th, we've got Mars in a conjunction with Uranus at 26 degrees Taurus. Again, it's Mars, so it's not an outer planet, but the conjunction with Uranus is pretty strong. And that is going to be picking up on some of the themes of the earlier conjunction in April. We've got the full moon in Capricorn on the 21st, and we've got the sun going into Leo on the 22nd. I think the 15th is a time to take it really steady and to pay attention, and to realize that there's likely to be a lot of irrational feelings and actions taking place. Mars in a conjunction to Uranus is quite explosive. Mars is very much about our vitality, our strength, our desire to survive. And Uranus is very much about all things new and changing and spontaneous. And sometimes changes can seem cruel as well as exciting. Not everyone goes very well with change. So this could be a little bit of a difficult change. And then between the 21st and the 22nd, with the full moon followed by the sun change, there's this idea of, I think, status and recognition. If you think like Capricorn is really known for being, it's got 10th house energy, very much about being in charge and getting to the top of the pile. Leo is obviously associated with being quite proud and also being quite strong and being the center of attention. So I do think the 21st, 22nd is about status and recognition and the tensions that occur when we don't get those. Let's see what chart I've put in. And I've brought in the chart for the new moon. And I did say that it was about our opportunities to correct mistakes. So let's see where that came from. So we've got the new moon here at 14 degrees in the sign of Cancer. Beautiful, actually. And it's in a trine to Saturn. So that's where I was coming from there. Saturn in the sign of Pisces, it's really not happy in the sign of Pisces. And he's doing a good job. He's doing the best job that he can. He's awakening us to where we've been weak, where we've been too imaginative, too creative, too spiritual, too maybe unfocused on a whole array of things. Saturn going through the sign of Pisces is really helping us to get discernment about our psyche, discernment about our belief systems, and to really test and trial things and to get a lot more serious. And, he's not comfortable in the sign of Pisces. So he's doing a great job. He's doing the best he can. I really like the work of Spencer Grendal, who talks about astrology and the games that people play, talking in terms of transactional analysis. and how that works in astrology, with the sun being the adult, the moon being the child, and Saturn being the adult. The parent. So we've got parent, adult, child, all working together. To me, it's the opportunity for us to grow up in ourselves. It's the opportunity for us to realize some of the things we do are still childish. Some of the things we might still be doing might be related to having had overbearing parents, or have had interactions with people that have bullied or coerced, or all of that natural nasty Saturn side that we see from time to time. But we've got a chance to mature through those problems that we might have had, and to become adult in our responses emotionally. So I see this as being very very helpful. We've also got this lovely energy here. Mars is coming into its conjunction with Uranus, which, like I said, is a bit explosive. But Mars is settling Saturn. Mars is saying, look, I hear you, Saturn. I know I need to take discernment. Mars in Taurus, I think, is pretty determined and can start to make changes. Mars is supporting our changes and our discernment into, not being so wishy-washy, not being so spread in our attentions. And then, Mars is also connecting in a sextile to the sun and the moon. This is all really sort of like helpful things. It feels like we are stepping through our changes gently. So we got Pisces, Taurus, and Cancer. They're all really, in a nice sort of resonance together. So I like this. And then also Venus here is in a trine with Neptune. So again, the planet of love and the planet of higher love working together. There's a lot of compassion, a lot of shared compassion. And then Pluto and Jupiter are still in their trine. So this is all really, really helpful. That's why I said it's a real gentle time. Let's move on to August then. So August is one of these big months again. A lot of things happening. We've also got our second Mercury retrograde. So it's going from Virgo, but into the sign of Leo. So again, I mentioned there's the Mercury and fire signs in terms of the retrograde. We've got the new moon in Leo on the 4th, which I've just put shine baby. This is, I think the new moon's always good to observe and to prepare for. And then we've got this very intense period of time between the 14th, the 16th, 19th and 22nd. So on the 14th, we've got Mars in a conjunction with Jupiter. That is going to set us alight in quite a positive way. Mars is about taking action. Jupiter is about expanding and having fun. I mean, this could be really raucous fun. This could be a great time, but it could be where we go over the top, especially depending on where the moon is at that time. It's worth watching out where in your chart that is impacting, because you are likely to do too much or go overboard, or maybe not consider the impact of your words. Mars in Gemini also, Mars can be quite critical and sarcastic and a bit sly in the sign of Gemini. They can use words as weapons. So that's a very, very strong chart. We then got Mars in a square to Saturn just a couple of days later. In truth, Mars will be in conjunction and square at the same time. It's just, I've marked the times when they're exact. That also means Jupiter is also square Saturn. So, we've got Mars, Jupiter and Saturn all together between the 14th, 16th and 19th in either a conjunction or a square. This is very, very tightly focused energy between Gemini and Pisces. I mean, if this makeup of the conjunction and squares was across cardinal signs, I would be very, very worried, because obviously cardinal signs get things done. They get things moving again. So, like one of the things I've noticed in particular in natal charts, Mars and Jupiter and Saturn all have something of the warrior within them. Saturn shows us discipline, and it shows us our ability to really focus and be determined, and also be quite cool in our thinking and strategic, which is quite handy for things like wars and, leading a platoon or something, leading a team of people. You need that cool person that can detach from emotion. And Saturn gives us that. Jupiter is full of pomp at its worst, and arrogance and pride, and can make these massive decisions, like massive sweeping decisions. But Jupiter is also wanting to feel good and wanting to expand. And so you might get an overbearing overreach with Jupiter if it's badly aspected. And then Mars is obviously our desire to thrive and survive and feel healthy and be vital. It's our strong sort of yang impulse. But when Mars is stressed and in a difficult aspect, it wants to attack. So you've got this possibly attacking, cool, strategic, overbearing energy, which to me is kind of military energy. Now, Gemini and Pisces, they're both mutable signs. Gemini is known for being two-faced, which I think is a bit unfair, or a lot unfair. Geminis literally have lots of friends and lots of connections. They're in so many different places, they're scattered, and it appears that they play many sides at the same time. But I think it's just like a natural, sort of friendly, outgoing energy that is focused on short-term outcomes, very sort of mercurial. And then Pisces is known as being swimming in different directions. And so with this, to me, it feels like there is something brewing, something really big, that appears to be going in different directions. So I'm getting subterfuge. I'm almost getting like there's some kind of action taking place, but we're being confusing about how we're taking it. So like in our own lives, we might be getting ready to take action, to be very cool and calm and deliberate about it, very purposeful about it. And some of these actions might have come about because we've got a bit arrogant or a little bit too full of ourselves. And so we're about to attack, or, we're about to grapple a big situation in our life. And we might be doing it in a confusing way. We might not be doing it in a very straight way. It might not be very honest. So I would say August the 14th to the 19th, and also the full moon in Aquarius on the same day, massively frustrating time, and could create some real big shit shows where people fall out with each other over the smallest things, which have been blown into big things. I would absolutely say if you've got something like that sounds like this building in your life, it's really important to tease it out and to get really specific about it, because, with the Gemini energy and the Pisces energy, you're not really going to get the full facts on anything to do with this. This is confusing energy for sure. And it's pulling you in as well. So I'd be really cautious of what you're getting involved in between the 14th to the 19th. Really, really, really cautious. Really watch where you're putting your energy and sharing it. I would also add to that that this is the first Jupiter-Saturn square. So, I've mentioned at the start of this video that the last time Jupiter and Saturn came together was on the 21st of December 2020. That's the start of their synodic cycle. It's the Jupiter-Saturn dance. And it takes them, I think, is it 20 years? Yeah, every 20 years they come together in a conjunction. And in that time, they come apart, they go into a square, they'll then go into an opposition, they come back round into another square, and then they come back together again. And in the first square, it's the first real challenge to their energy together. So if you think Jupiter is about expansion and Saturn's about contraction, and how those two energies work together, it's like there is a new force that is wanting to grow, and it's growing in a slow and careful way. So there is, what was growing carefully and what was growing in a careful and protected way from December 2020, around August of 2024 is its first kind of stressful point. It's either grown too fast, too quickly, and it can't support itself, and so it's going to come contracting in, or it's going to contract so much more and more people are going to become aware of it. So this could be a huge problem that you're going through in your life, that that is about to suddenly explode. If what you're talking about in your life mirrors back to what was happening at Christmas 2020, you'll realize it's part of this pattern. Like maybe you had a child born at that time, you started a relationship, anything born around that time, including the start of a really big pharmaceutical military operation, like a worldwide challenge to how humans behaved. That's likely to come up because this is the first big challenge to the Saturn and Jupiter energy. So I think things are going to blow up quite considerably around that time. In particular, the Jupiter square Saturn on the day of the full moon is huge. And then a few days later, the sun goes into Virgo. Anyway, let's have a look at one of these charts and see what comes up. So obviously I'm looking at the Jupiter square Saturn. So here's Jupiter. And there's Saturn. Now, at the start of this exact square, Jupiter's still typically in the separation of the Mars-Jupiter conjunction. So Jupiter is pretty fired up, and it's still got some of that like bad language, that foul language and hurtful language going on. Jupiter's no longer in the trine to Pluto. He's in a square to Venus. So Saturn and Venus are also in opposition, which I think is kind of cold and unfriendly. So to add into this whole mix, where I said, you've got Saturn, the strategy, the strategic look at things, which is a bit cold at times. It's even cooler than usual because it's in opposition to Venus. Whatever's going on at this time is separating us from each other. So if this is going on as something personal in your life, watch where you are separating from other people for the wrong reasons. Are you pushing people away so you don't have to face yourself? Are you pushing people away because you don't want to find out the truth? What is going on? How are you isolating yourself to take control? So I really do think that isolation, being separate from people, and wanting to expand and thinking you can only do it when other people aren't in the picture are really, really big themes for this time. Something that I think is quite useful about this, though, is that Chiron is really supporting the Jupiter-Mars energy. So it feels like we've learned something over however many years it is, over our lifetimes. We've learned something and we're able to move forwards. So whatever is going on, I would say, to me, it feels like the Saturn energy is trying to be prominent to separate us from each other and from our natural sense of compassion. But we remember what it's like to be hurt. We remember what it's like to be isolated. And we realize that if we are going to take personal action in our life that is going to expand us, that we need other people in our life. So I do think this Jupiter square Saturn, though it looks like a difficult moment in time, I do think it's going to lead us back to people, not away from people. But to me, it feels like there is something coming up that is trying to separate people. And it's not the only Jupiter square Saturn. So Jupiter's exactly in the square on the 19th of August, on the 24th of December in 2024, and then it's still in a square, or it's back in its exact square on June the 15th of 2025. So this is an ongoing theme, and they might come out of their square, but they're going to be going back into it. So yeah, definitely something to watch out for. Okay, so September then, we've got our new moon, we've got Mars square Neptune, Venus trine Jupiter, lovely. We've got our first of the second eclipse pairs, which is a North Node full moon. in Pisces. We've got Pluto going into retrograde. Pluto is retrograde and he's going back into Capricorn. And then the sun's going into Libra and we're starting the autumn equinox. So one of the first things I've noticed is, we've got Mars square Neptune on the day of the new moon in Virgo. So I think that's very much about how organized are we, and also how disenchanted we are. Mars, Neptune they're not very comfortable bedfellows. And when they're in a square, the dreaminess is very much frustrated by our need to take action. And so I always think it's quite disenchanting. And anyone that works with Mars, Neptune energy in a conjunction, square, opposition will most likely speak about despondency, disenchantment, where you might have felt a lot of energy and then all of a sudden your energy is just gone. So there's this need to get organized whilst also feeling quite disenchanted or possibly on the back foot. The 15th, I see the 15th really to the 18th, I would say, is a time of creative flow and beautiful opportunities. And then the 18th to the 22nd is really a scene change. And I think we're doing it by stepping backwards. So obviously Pluto is going into the sign of Capricorn. I see that as being a moment where we can't progress. We can't keep going in the direction we're going, and we need to take a step back and have a look at all the different opportunities and situations that have arisen. So it's like our moment of stepping back and reviewing. The full moon in Pisces is a very, very strong eclipse. And so obviously these eclipse points are, I see them as review points, and I see them as these kind of energetic, like there are two eclipse pairs in each year. These are the very strong driving forces of the year. So we're about to get driven into the future with a new step, but we're almost having to take a step back as Pluto retrogrades into Capricorn. And of course, we've got the equinox. So let's have a look at this next chart, which is the chart of the lunar eclipse. What I'm really noticing about this is that the moon is in a conjunction with Neptune in the tail end of Pisces. So again, it feels like we're at the end of a story. And I do think that when Neptune does come out of Pisces and into Aries, boy, are we going to see some massive changes in the way we do things. But, we're in the tail ends of understanding Western society, I think. And so we've got the tensions there. The North Node, like where we are heading, the challenges that we need to be focusing on are around how we're perceiving the world at the moment. Like Neptune is definitely a perceiver. It's the higher heart, the higher love, the higher connection in the sign of Pisces, the last sign of the zodiac in the last 2 degrees of the whole zodiac story. We are on a perceptual journey that is about to change. And I think we all know that. We all feel that somehow humanity is about to really shift a gear. So this is quite an emotional point for us. Also, our man of the match, Jupiter, is in a T-square to all of this. So he's observing how maybe there's a part of us that just really wants to keep in the old patterns and keep the old equilibrium. There's the sun in the sign of Virgo saying, look, as if it works, don't fix it. The sun is saying we don't need to change right now. Like it's currently working. And look, our South Node, everything that we know is in the sign of Libra, which is very, very peaceful, very diplomatic. Let's keep it all the way. Let's keep it how it's always been. It's always worked. It's don't fix it. It's not really massively broken. But in our psyche, we know that we are about to make a big change. And then Jupiter is like the stepping stone. We are having these conversations. Jupiter is enlivening our sense of belief. If you think of Jupiter is, he rules belief systems. He emphasizes I wouldn't necessarily say spirituality, but definitely our religious beliefs get a very strong pull, and political stuff. Jupiter is really getting us to think outside of our context in quite a big way. So this is a very deep and searching time. And at the start of the eclipse pairs, this is putting us in a very pensive mood. So October then, what's coming up for us in October? There's not too much that I've highlighted here. We've got the closing part of the eclipse, the annular solar eclipse, which is the new moon in Libra, and it's the south node new moon. So again, it's a feeling of clearing our old contacts. I think there's greater clarity on our partnerships. So I do think it's a day to watch, the 2nd of October. Then on the 12th, we've got Jupiter sextile Chiron. Now, last year, or in 2023, I recorded something about the Jupiter conjunction with Chiron. So, Jupiter started a new Chiron journey, or they started a new journey together. And so I was talking about the potential for healing and the potential for growth through healing, which we're on this journey right now. And this took place in the sign of Aries. Now Jupiter is in a sextile to Chiron, so they really are early on in their journey. This is the first connection that they've made since they've took this journey. So I do think this is an important time. In my code words here, I've said ask for help, be a mentor, because Jupiter is about expanding and Chiron is about becoming that mentor, becoming that leader, becoming that guru. And I think we need to ask for help. We either need to become the mentor or ask for help from people. And, we've got this Gemini and Aries energy, which is, very much about working with leaders. We've got the full moon in Aries on the 17th, and then we've got the sun moving into Scorpio 5 days later. So again, there's this very strong Mars energy going on. And so I've said the 17th to the 22nd, I think it's like putting your best foot forward and to take charge. But let's have a look at a chart for October. So I've looked at the annular solar eclipse, the other side of the energy. And yeah, you'll see here, so we've got the sun and the moon at 10 degrees in the sign of Libra. If you've got anything around that, that's going to be heavily impacted. So for instance, all you Gen Xers with your Pluto in Libra, you might want to take a look at that. Mercury's also there. So this is a very, very strong day. It's also in a conjunction with the South Node. It's really reminding us of all the old habits that we need to let go of, all the things that have come to pass. In particular, if your Pluto is there, you're probably, realizing that there are some old controls that you've had around your relationships that you can just let go of now. Now, this is in a square to Mars here. So, the Mars energy to the sun and moon is interesting. You'll be very vitalized by this. You'll be very energized and wanting to move forwards and take action on whatever it is you're learning about. Mars is also in a square to Chiron. Again, there's this need to take action and to move beyond your old patterns. And obviously, we've still got this Saturn and Jupiter square. So I do see this as taking action to move beyond our old relationship patterns in a new way. And we're realizing we don't need to control everything quite so much as we did before. So it's all good stuff from my perspective. November then looks like it's getting a little bit more busy. Mars opposition Pluto is definitely a big one. So the new moon is on the 1st in Scorpio. I see that as being a time for healing and surrender. We've also got Jupiter sextile Chiron, so it's gone back into its exact position again. On the 3rd, we've got Mars in the opposition to Pluto. 15th, we've got the full moon. On the 21st, we've got the sun going into Sagittarius. And on the 26th, we've got the 3rd Mercury retrograde of the year, which starts at 22 degrees Sagittarius and goes all the way back to 6 Sagittarius. So this is quite a big time. I do think the 15th, where we've got the full moon in Taurus, I think that's going to bring up quite a lot of eccentricity and frayed nerves. It's at 24 degrees, so it's connecting to Uranus, hence why I've said it's kind of eccentric. You know, the moon and Uranus together. I mean, maybe you're somebody who's got your moon and Uranus together at birth, or you've got a partner like that or a child. Any moon Uranus people that I know have this kind of real need for change that can be quite disturbing in a family home. You know, they have these sudden like changes of heart, and like when they change, it can be like really devastating for them and for the people around them. So I do think, you know, our emotions at this time are going to be chopping and changing all over the place. So that's why, you know, I said it could be frayed nerves. But you know, this can also be quite fun. I mean, these, you know, people born with this particular aspect at birth, you know, they're also great fun because they're always ready to be spontaneous and inventive and to create some new kind of mischief and mayhem. So it's all good. Right, let's have a look at one of our charts from there. So I've picked up on the Mars opposition Pluto. So this is the opposite energy to the energy that was coming up on the 14th on Valentine's Day. And so when Mars and Pluto came together on Valentine's Day, 2024, it was at 1 degree in the sign of Aquarius. Now we've got the last Pluto and Mars opposition in the sign of Capricorn and Cancer. Now, Mars and Pluto oppositions can be quite nasty. You know, if you do a search on the internet about Mars and Pluto oppositions, historically there are often horrible coups and weird attacks and things like that. You know, because if you think Pluto, you know, at the start I said, you know, he's the god of the underworld, and all of our fears. It's all hidden. If you think he's at the far reaches of our solar system, we can't really see that far. You know, it's hidden. We don't really know the pure potential of cruelty and darkness that might come from Pluto. That said, I do think the biggest shifts I've had in my life have come from Pluto aspects, and I've been very grateful for them. I mean, Pluto shows us where we die to ourselves. You know, it is the death and destruction. It is the eternal compost bin. You know, you put all your stuff in the compost bin, it gets completely destroyed and turned around, but it then becomes black gold. It becomes beautiful soil. So, you know, it's the inevitable phoenix, you know, burning and then coming back to life, you know, like resurrection. So it's the destruction and resurrection. And so it's such a strong theme. This is like the right tippy tail of Pluto in Capricorn. He's about to go into Aquarius for, you know, the last time, and he'll be in Aquarius for another 20 years. So this is a real strong moment. This is like Pluto's last ditch attempt to get attention in the sign of Capricorn, and he's in opposition with Mars. Mars takes action. Mars is absolutely about survival, and is known for being ruthless when really, really stressed. So seeing Pluto and Mars together in this opposition is pretty strong. So if we think about, you know, what's going on in our personal lives, you might realize that there's an old pattern that absolutely has to go now, and you need to take absolute, really strong action about it. So you might want to look at where Pluto is in your birth chart right now, what you absolutely have to take action on. I think if every one of us takes really strong personal action to eliminate that old pattern, to surrender into something new, to allow your ego to die, to be reborn in a new way. I'm not telling you to hurt yourself or anything or anyone, I promise you, but like allow an aspect of yourself to pass away. You know, if it's an aspect of yourself that has held you in chains, that's made you vulnerable, that has, I don't know what it is, because obviously you're the person living your own life here. So there is an aspect that we need to let go of, so that we can be reborn. And here it's almost like the more we're struggling, the more it takes effect. It's much better to just let it go and say, I'm done. and then feel the peace of not being in that struggle anymore. But and this is one of my fears, and so forgive me, because if I'm using astrology for my own fears, then that's not very clever. But Capricorn, Pluto and Capricorn, like Pluto does represent generations and the epochs, the eras we live through. And so for the last 15 years, it's definitely been in the sign of Capricorn, at a time of monopolies, global governments working towards being more global. It's power, creating more power for itself and more power for itself. And, as everything that creates more power for itself, it can only do that by destroying anything that seeks to challenge it for power. So it's an energy that's just going to, a bit like a cancer, it's going to die eventually, because the cancer can only go too far before it kills its host. And so Pluto, like in this malignant state, really wanting to govern everything and to have control of absolutely everything, it's going to kill itself, because it's unsustainable. Because once you killed everyone, or once you've got control of everyone, you lose the essence of what life is about. You killed it. And so at some level, this Pluto opposition to Mars, I see as being the death of the global governments. Of course, I don't think that is, because I think they're just going to transform in Pluto in Aquarius, like a technical, like a technological AI kind of governance. But I think the idea of how governments used to be, and maybe they've been formed by countries with corporations behind them, because Capricorn is all very corporate, so we've had these corporations running our governments, owning our governments, telling our governments what to do, funding our governments, and it's all looked very normal and above board. Maybe the illusion of that is going to die, I don't know. But when Pluto fully embraces being in the sign of Aquarius, then maybe governments won't be based on country. They might be based on markets. They might be based on technology. They could be based on anything. Do we really belong to countries anymore? So many people now, I shouldn't ask these questions. I got a little bit trolled last month, asking a rhetorical question, and someone's like, how could you possibly say that? Only a crazy person would say that. But let's, as Pluto goes into Aquarius, we might be considering where we belong. Because like Aquarius is doesn't belong to anyone. Like people who've got a very strong Aquarian theme in their chart, they don't like to be owned by anyone. They don't like the feeling of ownership in particular. They consider themselves to be themselves. We've got people working all over the world in all sorts of different ways. I myself, I'm a Brit living in Portugal, working online. Not really I am part of the Portuguese economy for sure. But actually most of my work is outside of Portugal. And so there's loads of people working in all different places. So like, where do you really belong? Is it the place you're actually living in? Is it the place you're transacting in? And who's going to be in charge? A government's going to be in charge, or people like companies like Google and YouTube going to be in charge, or Serco going to be in charge? Like, are they going to be the new entities? Who knows? I do think there's a lot of change. And I think this opposition is the death of the old control. It's the changing of the guards massively. But as ever, look internally first. And if we all do it internally, hopefully, it should be easier for us to manage. But I think when we're not doing the work ourselves internally, that energy of Pluto opposition Mars is out there. It needs to be held and processed. It's like, this is how I see astrology. I see that the energies that present themselves need to be used. Energy gets used and gets transformed. So we'll use it. If we don't use it, it kind of hits us anyway. It's like use it or lose it, or use it or it uses you. A bit like if you spill some water, it needs to be mopped up. I think we all do the mopping up as we're processing the energy. We're mopping it up. We're using it. It is getting transformed into new things. If we're not using it, then who's going to use it? The governments could use it. So there you go. That's my little rant. Probably sound more mad now, but who cares? So yeah, there you go. There's some thoughts about Mars opposition Pluto. December then, the last month of 2024. So yeah, we've got Mars going retrograde, which I think is pretty big, because yes, I've mentioned that Mars and Pluto are in opposition in November, but of course, Mars going retrograde is going to move back into that at some point. So there are going to be, I think, 3 Mars-Pluto oppositions. So that's pretty big. It's going to be 79 days of Mars retrograde. It's going to be interesting. It's going to take us all the way through to the end of February 2025. So we've got the new moon in Sag, we've got the full moon in Gemini. Then between the winter solstice and the new year, we've got the Jupiter square Saturn second exact square, and then the new moon in Capricorn. So I think you do need to take a chance on yourself. The new moon in Sagittarius, I think, is a time of uplift and optimism usually. So it's a time to really take a chance, be adventurous with yourself. The 15th, the full moon in Gemini, I would say just be very, very cautious. There's some big things going on. Mars has just gone retrograde, and we've got this Jupiter square Saturn. The 21st to 30th, I see as a time of testing, growth, and maturity. So let's just have a look at our last chart, which is the second Jupiter square Saturn. Now, obviously, the Jupiter square Saturn has moved on somewhat from the previous one. And some of the new energies at that time are, we've got a T-square actually between Jupiter, Saturn, and Mercury. Again, all mutable. So Sagittarius, Pisces, and Gemini. So if you think of Jupiter and Saturn, you've got expansion and contraction, and then you've got Mercury here talking about it. So Mercury is talking against the expansion or questioning the expansion, and is also frustrating the contraction. Kind of interesting. Mercury is not very powerful. Isn't it interesting? So Saturn's not very powerful in Pisces. Jupiter's not very powerful in Mercury. In Gemini, and Mercury is not very powerful in Sagittarius. In fact, Mercury and Jupiter are in their opposing signs. So, Mercury's much happier here. Jupiter's much happier there. So, this is quite a frustrating time for us all. We've got this lovely trine between the moon and, square of lovely. Let me take that back. A lovely trine between the moon and Venus, and a square between the moon and Pluto. So we are dealing with our own inner controls, and also wanting to experience our own inner flow, but maybe not able to have the conversations very well. So yes, a deeply, deeply frustrating time. So there you go. There are some of my thoughts about the year 2024. Like I said right at the start, there's a whole heap of massive, massive energies. Like I said, I'm going to be exploring the Jupiter and Saturn relationship, the synodic cycles, a little bit more in other videos, just because the synodic cycle that started in the year 2000 is being absolutely emphasized with the Jupiter and Uranus conjunction in April. So there is some kind of symbiosis there. There is something connecting the two. Is it to do with the European markets? Who knows? And then obviously the cycle that Jupiter and Saturn came into at sort of 21st of December 2020, that is where Pluto and Mars are really having some fun in this year ahead. This is a very, very strong year. And like I said, with the first of the Jupiter square Saturn energies. So yeah, lots and lots of change. If you found this interesting and would like to know more, then do stay tuned and check out my next video, which is looking at the energies of 2024. What are the highlights on a sign by sign basis? But anyway, lots and lots of love to you in 2024. I hope you have a fantastic year ahead and hope to stay connected. Lots of love. Bye for now.